Oregon football officially misses out on five-star quarterback out of the state of California, Nico Iamaleava. He has committed to Tennessee in the class of 2023 to be a volunteer. Thoughts on that? And Will Richardson, Oregon's point guard for the last couple of years and leading scorer from this past season. His future is uncertain. So what are the odds that he stays, comes back for a fifth year at Oregon under Dana Altman? All of that coming up today on Locked On Ducks. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view every day on this right here, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks every single day. Like and subscribe if you have not already. If you're watching the show on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. If you want to leave a nice comment, by all means, we will never tell you no to doing that. Like and subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. If you're listening on podcasts right now, nice comments and 5-star reviews, always welcome over there as well. So, Nico Iamaleava, a subject of a couple of episodes here on Locked On Ducks. He's going to Tennessee. He announced he's committed to the Volunteers. This after the reports of the big-time NIL deal, $8 million. And oh my goodness, the world is falling. If you came on here, that's a fun part of English right there. That was really good, Spencer. If you came on here to listen to me talk about how this is disastrous for Oregon and they really needed this guy, and it is just, a terrible situation, the sky is falling, world is ending, you've come to the wrong pod, because that is not the case. Did I want Oregon to get this guy? Yeah, of course I did. He's a 5-star quarterback. He's awesome. Great physical traits. His stock is only rising. It's a great get for Tennessee. And by the way, I harbor no ill will towards Tennessee for a couple of reasons. Number one, we beat him in 2010. It's hard to dislike an opponent you played once, and in 2013. So when you've beaten an opponent twice in the last 15 years, it's hard to dislike them that much. Number two, Tennessee fans really don't like USC because of Lane Kiffin. And guess what? We as Duck fans, we're not that big fans of USC either. So I've got no beef with Tennessee. I wish this guy nothing but the best. I hope the Vols become a good program again. They have one of the best environments in college football. Shout out to Tennessee. Good old Rocky Top up there. When they get the checkered sections going, that's a spectacle right there in college football. But Nico Iamaleava is going there. And as I said, first and foremost, Duck fans, everything is okay. We're okay. It's fine. We're okay. We're gonna be fine. We're going to survive. I really believe that. And part of the reason that I'm confident about that is Duck fans have already looked at the next highly rated quarterback who could come to Oregon, and that's Jaden Rashada. I've watched some film on him. He looks pretty awesome. His motion looks great. Got some athleticism, very accurate throwing the deep ball. Maybe a deep dive on the pod sometime later in a future episode. But that's the reason, just the fact that that's already taking place, that there are Duck fans online trying to draw him to the University of Oregon, that alone is telling to the state of this football program, its potential and capability to bring in big-time recruits. Just because we miss out on one doesn't mean we aren't going to be able to go and get another. Now, Oregon is one of, some 30-odd schools who have gotten Jaden Rashada, but they're one of the 30 schools who have made an offer, I should say. But those are the sorts of players Oregon is going to be in the mix for. Just because we missed on one doesn't mean we're going to miss on all of them. Still waiting Josh Connerly Jr.'s decision, by the way. I believe April 8th is when he said, and that's the class of 2022 guy, 5-star offensive lineman out of the state of Washington. He's down to a few schools, USC, Miami, Oregon's in there. I think Georgia, maybe others. There's a lot of big names going after that guy. But this is not a disaster that Nico has decided to become a Tennessee Volunteer. If it's because of the NIL deal, okay, more power to him. All right. Oregon still has a very strong brand. They're going to continue to bring in high-level recruits. I have a lot of faith in this staff, particularly on the recruiting trail, and we've seen in the last 4 years what Oregon is capable of from a recruiting standpoint, and it's a lot. And so it's not as if we haven't missed on recruits before, right? It's this time NIL played a factor, and it's now something to consider in college football, but it's not the only thing. It's not like every recruit is going to have to get an NIL deal to come to school. The overwhelming majority are not going to have them. This guy got a lot of money. Tennessee really wanted him. They've been down recently. They were willing to put this sort of money into an 18-year-old who's never played a snap of college football. That's okay. Fine. That's their prerogative. If that's what they feel is in their best interest, then they can go for it. And they've got him. And, Iamaleava did not talk about the NIL deal when asked about his recruitment. I didn't expect him to, right? He talked about the offensive scheme being more of a fit, which, to be fair, it might be. He's not exactly a huge runner. He's listed as a pro-style quarterback. He's mobile, but he wants to make plays from the pocket. And I think Kenny Dillingham's going to run the quarterback a pretty decent amount. So it might actually be a better fit. But it's also pretty clear that if this NIL deal is true, it has to have played a significant role because that is a lot of money. But as I've said, he is supremely talented. He's got all the physical tools that you could want. Maybe needs to put on a little weight, a touch thin, but that can be improved upon pretty easily. If you look at Herbert when he was a senior versus when he was a freshman, he was quite a bit skinnier as a freshman, and he still had a cannon of an arm. But by the time he was a senior, he was throwing missiles all over the field at Autzen Stadium and all over the Pac-12 as well. And this Nico Iamaleava guy is really talented. You're not a 5-star quarterback by accident. But would I have felt as good about it if Oregon had made a $10 million NIL offer to up the ante and get him to commit to the Ducks? As if instead of just getting him? Not really, right? It is if Oregon had to go in, commit that much money to a young guy and put that added amount of pressure on him, I don't know that I would have been a huge fan. So I'm okay with him going. I don't think he's going to suddenly become a terrible quarterback for Tennessee. I think he'll be pretty darn good. But would that give me pause if Oregon had to give him this extra amount of money and then that extra level of pressure was there for him to perform on the field? Yeah, it would give me a little bit more pause than if he just committed to the Ducks, without any sort of deal. So not the end of the world. Oregon's going to be fine on the recruiting trail. I have complete faith in that. And this is not, there's one more reason that Oregon is fine after all this, and I'll tell you what it is. But first, I want to tell you about Stat Hero. I love March Madness. You love March Madness. And I love doing brackets every year. It's thrilling. It's exciting. But I can't remember the last time I actually went deep or won any money or did really well. I'm hedging my bets this year with Stat Hero's NCAA Pick'em contests. Stat Hero's NCAA single game pick'ems pits the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. In addition to their pick'em games, they also have dozens of lineups you can comb through to take on head-to-head. They simply post the sets of players for you to take on with a set of players you choose. This simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. This is what daily fantasy was meant to be. Head to stathero.com/lockedon to learn more. This episode of Locked On Ducks also brought to you by Built Bar. As always, had one earlier today. Got me through my round of golf, and had I not had it, and the 17 grams of protein that are in Built Bars, along with the delicious flavors they have, mint brownie's my favorite, as many of you probably remember, then I probably would not have done very well on the course today. But overall, was able to scrape it together. Built Bars, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. I forgot to pack a sandwich today, but I had a Built Bar in my bag, so I was good to go. Compare that to a candy bar, which has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, dozens of net carbs. They've got a bunch of amazing flavors. Go to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off of your next order. That is BuiltBar.com. Use promo code LOCK15. You get 15% off your order. The other reason this is not a disaster, sky is falling, scramble around, panic time on the recruiting trail for the Oregon Ducks is, yes, NIL in this instance appears to be the reason that Nico decided to go to Tennessee. But NIL in and of itself is not something Oregon is ignoring because, let me remind you, Oregon was the first school in the country to establish a program on campus that allows athletes to go and explore and maximize their NIL opportunities. They have that on campus. They're not overlooking this. Tennessee just happened to make a bigger offer, right? The same way that in past years, Oregon has been able to make a better offer on facilities. Say, this is what we've got. These are our facilities. Look how amazing and awesome they are. And everybody else has started to step up their game a little bit. These things are going to balance out, and the good programs will stay good and competitive on the recruiting trail. And Oregon, especially as of late, has proven prolific in that sense and is going to be able to recruit at a high level. Just because they didn't get this guy does not mean that it's a sign of a lack of faith in the coaching staff that we should start to have, or that they're not the recruiters that they were hyped up to be. We've seen them salvage a class from the high 50s to low 60s, all the way up to a top 25 caliber class. They could still get another 5-star in the class of 2022. And that's in the season that they took over. They haven't even had a full cycle yet. I have a lot of confidence in this staff on the trail. And the other thing is Tennessee needed this commitment more than Oregon did. Not saying Oregon shouldn't have wanted him. Of course they should have. And if one day they could flip him to come back to the Ducks, yeah, I would totally be on board with that. But you look at it from Tennessee's perspective, a pitch that they have is Nico has a chance to sort of kind of rescue their brand because they have not been at the pinnacle of college football in quite some time. They're one of those blue blood programs that's trying to get back to the mountaintop of Rocky Top, you might say, and they haven't been able to do it. So they can sell that to him as you're the guy who can help get us there. And he talked about how he wants to be Nico did that is he wants to be, kind of a recruiter for Tennessee and help bring guys over. That's a different pitch than what you make at Oregon, which is a continuation of a strong brand in college football and a new culture under Dan Lanning and the offensive staff. And yes, of course, the NIL deal, assuming that is true, played a role. But he's their biggest commitment since I think 2015, I read online, in terms of overall rating. So it was a really big grab, and it's not a surprise to see Tennessee going after a guy like that. And of course, Oregon wanted him. They should want him. And if there's ever a hint or indication that maybe Tennessee is not the place he ends up wanting to go, Oregon should put their name back into the hat. You never know who he's going to pull out if he pull out of the hat, metaphorically speaking, of course, if he decides to flip his commitment elsewhere. But I don't think we should plan for that. But the Oregon staff should certainly be prepared for that. Let's get to Will Richardson and basketball. So where are the Ducks going to go at point guard for the 2022-23 season? We don't know. We do not officially know who the lead point guard is going to be. We don't know if Davion Harmon will be back. Jacob Young, his college days are done. His final year of eligibility was used up this past season with the Ducks. But Will Richardson, a guy who has been in this program since he was a true freshman, playing since he was a true freshman, and having an impact on the court all 4 years he's been with the Ducks, his future is kind of uncertain. So the question becomes, yeah, I tied myself into another knot there. I've done that a couple times today. Is Will Richardson going to return? If you don't make yourself laugh at least 3 or 4 times today, you're doing it wrong. Is Will Richardson going to return? Here's what Dana Altman said about Will Richardson. If Will wants to come back, great. If he wants to go pro, great. If he wants to go somewhere else, great. I want Will to be happy. And then he went on to talk about guys in general at Oregon, as I've been saying in the last couple of days on the pod. If they're not all in at Oregon, we won't accomplish what we want to accomplish. And he ended it by saying, I hope he comes back, referring to Will Richardson. That's a feeling Duck fans everywhere should sort of have. I know Will Richardson in the basketball fandom community, maybe not the most popular guy right now after how the season ended. And I understand that, but we shouldn't forget how good of a player Will Richardson is. I'll get to that here in just a second, but first I want to tell you this episode is brought to you by RockAuto.com. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. You don't have to go to the auto parts store where they don't have the parts you're looking for, or someone goes behind a computer and asks you a bunch of intimidating questions. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every consumer, and it's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Okay, need to take a breath there. Just like we're rolling today. Lots of energy. By the way, this is a Mariota jersey from years ago. I hope you can kind of see that. I meant to wear it yesterday when I was talking about Marcus, and then I forgot. Like I'd planned to, and then I put on a different shirt, and then I forgot, and then I remembered later, and I said, I could. Now we'll honor him tomorrow because love to see Marcus getting a second chance with the Atlanta Falcons. Really excited for all that sort of stuff. And so is Will Richardson going to return? That's the question right now for Oregon basketball, of which there are many going to 2022. There will be a lot of roster changes going forward, I expect, and Dana Altman expects that as well, which is why you should like and subscribe to the pod so that you can keep up with all of them here on Locked On Ducks, because I've got you posted every day. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell whether Will Richardson is going to come back for the Ducks. Dana Altman talked about how he's a quiet guy, and coach doesn't know what Will Richardson is going to do next. I don't know if Will knows at this point in time, and he's going to keep it very tight to the chest. And probably around the time that Coach Altman knows is when the rest of us will know. I'm sure Coach will know first, but there's not going to be a big gap there, I would imagine, because Will is not the sort of guy, at least just judging from Coach's words here, who's going to, speculate or kind of throw stuff out there or give quotes to the media or drop a little nugget over here and then another little thing over there. He's not going to do that. He's just going to play it down low, keep it simple, think about what he wants to do, come out, make his decision, and we'll follow that along. Now, could he be a pro prospect? Maybe. He's 6'4", 6'5". He's got good size for a guard. He's a good defender. He's not the player that Peyton Pritchard is. He's definitely not. Who, by the way, I looked up the other day, Peyton Pritchard is shooting 40% from beyond the arc, and he's done so each of the last 2 years for the Boston Celtics on a team that is good and competitive in the Eastern Conference. That guy has blossomed into a really, really nice backup point guard. But that's one way that I think about Will Richardson's pro prospects is Peyton Pritchard is a backup point guard. He'll probably always be that. He's made a couple spot starts this year for the Celtics when guys have been hurt, but primarily just, mostly because of his size and relatively limited athleticism, though he's still a very good player. He's a backup point guard in the NBA. So Pritchard is smaller than Will Richardson, so he's got that going for him. Though Pritchard is certainly able to hold his own at the defensive end from what I have seen from him in the NBA. He's just a solid player all around. I'm a Trailblazers fan. I would love if he were my backup point guard on any team. I think Pritchard shoots with better range. He's got a better handle, and I think he's a better passer and facilitator within the offense. I think Will probably has a higher ceiling at the defensive end. And though Richardson is a good shooter, he doesn't shoot with the consistent amount of range that Pritchard does. And I think that limits his upside a little bit, or at least his overall potential as a pro prospect when teams are looking at him, because I don't see him as a starting point guard in the NBA. I see him as a guy who could definitely be a bench player. And he was actually recruited to Oregon as a combo guard, so he could maybe carve out, a two-guard role off the bench somewhere or be a hybrid point guard, shooting guard type of player, depending on the offensive scheme. And it's just kind of hard to tell. And I haven't looked at any draft boards at this time. This is just my assessment of him from having watched almost every game he's played at Oregon over the last 4 years. And we know that Peyton Pritchard's got more alpha in him than Will Richardson. That matters to an extent, but it matters more in college than it does in the pro for both of these guys as we're comparing them, which is obviously what I'm doing right now, because neither is going to be the number one guy on his team. So when you're looking to address a bench role, you're not as concerned about, does this guy have supreme leadership capabilities? Because he's not going to have to be the number one, the guy that everyone is looking to. So that's not really a place where you could look at Richardson and say, boy, he was supposed to be a number one this year and he led his team in scoring and he had really good moments, but the team was, really inconsistent and he's just kind of a quiet, reserved guy. That's not a huge knock on him as you look at him going to the NBA. He's got the size. He's got the strength. He's a good finisher inside. Not great, but good. His mid-range game is really undeveloped. I mean, think about Will Richardson's time at Oregon. Can you think of a time when he shot a mid-range jumper? Me neither. Pritchard, all the time. He showed the ability to post up other guards. He showed ability to pull up kind of around that free throw line area. Will is very much an inside-outside player. He wants to either finish at the rim, slashing downhill in transition or off a pick and roll, and he's a good passer. He's just not as good as Pritchard, I don't think, from what I have seen, or he's going to be able to catch and shoot. Now, that's a valuable component, and Pritchard adds that as well. That's one of the reasons that he's succeeding in Boston in the role that he's got. I think he averaged 7 points a game last year and about 5.5, 6 points a game this year is the former Westland star. Shout out to Portland area high schools. But Will Richardson can catch and shoot, and that's certainly valuable, right? If you were looking for a player who's going to play some point guard, but not exclusively point guard, maybe doesn't have to have the ball in his hands all the time because you have a point forward on your team running the second unit. Maybe that's something that Will Richardson can, I don't want to say exploit is not the right word, but utilize to his advantage that he doesn't have to have the ball in his hands all the time. I think that helps him. But I think another year in college is best. So this is my prediction. I think he's going to go the way of Travis Dye and say 4 years at Oregon was great. I loved my time here. I loved working for you, coach, but it's just been a long time and I want to try something else. I've got a chance to do that. And I think he transfers to another school. Where that is, hard to say. He could play in the Pac-12. A school like Washington or Washington State would certainly take him, though that would be a downgrade from him from a winning perspective. I think he could go to a tournament caliber team. I think if you slid him into UCLA's lineup, put him in the backcourt with Tiger Campbell, I think that would be a pretty dynamic duo at both ends of the floor. I think there are some places that could certainly be a fit, but I think that his stock was riding really high when he had back-to-back Pac-12 Player of the Week honors this year. But now I feel like it's probably a little lower. And I think he could raise it up higher if he were to go to another school and prove that he's able to come in and have an impact no matter where he is. I think that'd be beneficial for him, get him more exposure, more time on national TV, and he'd also get to develop and refine his game. And, maybe he wants to come back to Oregon and be with Dana Altman again. But with the way the season ended, kind of feels like it might be time, in his mind anyway, that I just want to try something else. And we shouldn't hold that against him if he does. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he comes back. He's a really good player. And I know there were ups and downs this year, but Will Richardson was our leading scorer. He's a good shooter, a good passer, plays hard at the defensive end, does a lot of really good things for the Oregon basketball program. So I want him to come back, but I bet you he transfers before he tries to go and make it into the NBA. Wish him nothing but the best if that's what he chooses to do, but hope he's back in Eugene for another 5th year. And by the way, I forgot to touch on this yesterday. Women's basketball lost in the first round. They got upseeded by 12th seeded Belmont. It was a tough game. It was just one of those March games where an upset took place because I thought Oregon won the game about 3 times. They had a 3 at the end from Pow Pow at the end of regulation to send it to overtime. I thought they won it about 3 times in overtime. I thought they won it 2 more times in double overtime. And Belmont, to their credit, hit some shots, made some plays, ultimately bested the Ducks and ended their season. And it was rocky for the men. It was rocky at times for the women, but they were a 5 seed. Thought they would get to what would have been, I believe, their 7th straight Sweet 16, but wasn't meant to be for Kelly Graves and company this year. No. I've got no worries about them as a program. Same thing with the men. It's a down year, but Oregon's down years in basketball look pretty darn good compared to some other down years in the college basketball landscape. I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.